All right. So it's been like 10 months since we've last been at SFU, but still I'm offering these workshops through SFU. So um, I'd like to acknowledge the land that SFU is on. It's on the ancestral and unceded land of Coast Salish people. And these are the nations on which all three campuses sit. I think Vancouver and Burnaby, it's the same nations, and Surrey is the Kakite, the Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen peoples. So I think there's only like 4 of you or 5 of you here right now. So you might not feel so reticent about actually unmuting yourself and saying something. So either in the chat box or by unmuting yourself, I would just like to get a sense of what people's biggest time management challenges are going into this workshop. Possibly some of the factors that led you to this workshop. Okay, somebody just, Danielle, my biggest time management challenge is staying motivated when I don't understand how to do a part of the assignment. Life work balance, yeah, which I think is particularly hard in, when everyone's doing stuff from home as well. Is there anyone else who's wanting to say something? Oh, there's a couple. Okay, a lot more distractions studying from home, totally. Procrastination and dealing with all the readings. Yeah, and I think in some ways Danielle might be talking about procrastination as well, because one of the big reasons why people tend to procrastinate is if you don't feel that you have the resources to, to do what you have to do. So the thing that I most recommend for that one is to tackle an assignment pretty early. And that way, if you identify that there's parts of it that you can't do, or you just find it really difficult in general, it gives you plenty of time to seek help. And I know that seeking help isn't as easy now when you can't actually just drop by your professor's office or whatever. But I see help seeking as like a really good time management strategy, and a good motivational anti-procrastination kind of strategy as well. I've had so many students, like I have students in my Back on Track class where it's actually an assignment. They actually have to go and seek help and write a journal entry about what happened. And a lot of them are like, well, it's the first time I went to an instructor's office and they cleared up something in 10 minutes that it would have taken me 2 hours to clear up myself. And then it also, like, not only does it clear up the issue, the academic issue, but it breaks that whole anxiety. Like basically when you don't know how to do something, the emotion tends to be anxiety, which leads to avoidance, procrastination, and it just really sucks out your motivation. So yeah, I'm really glad you shared that one. And the others we're definitely going to be addressing. So the next question, either in chat or by unmuting yourself, is what are you currently doing to manage your time? So, I'm interested also in what works for you. And, even if it only just kind of partially works, I'm interested in hearing it because it could be, a good starting point or even a good starting point for other people. Bullet journaling. Yeah. I mean, that is quite a popular technique now. And if you don't know what that is, you can certainly Google it. And having a digital calendar for somebody else. Yeah, so the common thing between those two entries is having some sort of written system where it's not just in your head. And Daniela is saying something quite similar about writing things down. scheduling, to-do lists. Yeah, so you all, it's great because it sounds like you all have some sort of written system, although they are different. And it's a good example of like, do what works for you, you know, because I am going to be, you know, talking about some written kind of scheduling tools. But, you know, for some people, like planning out your whole week really works well. For some people, you know, making it more task-based and, you know, or just making a daily list of priorities that's kind of an easier way to get started if you've never written anything down. And it can be more useful. Like I've actually said to myself, I was in this professional development workshop on, I believe it was Thursday, about working and leading in a pandemic. And that was kind of my big takeaway, that, you know, I really need to do a better job of making my daily lists, because I tend to throw too much on there and then kind of just ignore them. I have to make it meaningful by keeping it small. Okay. So I really just want to encourage you to go easy on yourself here. Time management tends to be an area of people's lives where, you know, you're kind of constantly beating yourself up, you know, because it's one of those areas like writing, like a lot of things where you're never going to be perfect at it. There's always room for improvement. And also it is, you know, it's sort of such a pitfall that a lot of people experience, particularly in school. And I think really the more you beat yourself up about it, even in normal situation where there's not a pandemic, there's actually proven research that people who procrastinate in particular and then feel guilty about it, it kind of feeds that whole anxiety procrastination cycle, and they tend to procrastinate again. People who forgive themselves and go gentle on themselves are less likely to repeat the procrastination. And I don't know if there's research on this, but I would imagine that it's similar with other time management strategies and pitfalls, you know, because time management is something that people tend to use to beat themselves up. And when you beat yourselves up about something, then it creates anxiety and, you know, and guilt, which does tend to hold people back from acting. So that's just in general with time management. It's better to go easy on yourself. But in this situation, you know, you're all, like you've referred to it, so many distractions at home. You're in a less than ideal study environment for a lot of people. Some people, you know, do thrive studying at home, but back when we were in person, you know, most of the students I talked to about this felt that they did better in the library or in a Starbucks or something like that. And now it might not really be open to you. I mean, I guess some of these settings are open. I do want to alert you that if you are in the Lower Mainland, you can study in a socially distanced way. Masks required, student IDs required, Monday to Friday afternoons at the SFU library on the Burnaby campus. You might not actually know that it's open, but people have like different comfort levels about that. Like I'm personally really glad that I don't have to go up to Burnaby campus. It's supposed to be safe, but you know, then like if you're taking transit to go there, you have to factor that in as well. But you know, depending, that might be an option if you're really, really struggling to do it at home. Yeah, and also that instructors are also learning as they go. It might not be quite so bad now as when the pandemic started, but every term there's instructors that are new to it still. You know, they might hire a new sessional or, you know, somebody who's gotten away, somebody senior who's gotten away without teaching all this time comes back and they have to teach again. You know, and depending on other demands in their lives and, you know, personal issues and whatever, you know, they just might not have enough time to really spend on putting together their course and marking and responding to students like as much as they might want to. So then that complicates things for you as a student. You have to, you know, allow more time when you're trying to get in touch with them and that kind of thing. So yeah, and I do want to point out, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a pretty classic psychology concept. Like I would venture to say that anyone who took any psychology in high school or university has probably encountered it. And it has to do with like the different needs in our lives. And unless your lower level needs are met, it's harder to move up to your higher level needs. So, you know, the sorts of learning and growth and achievement that you're looking for in university, those are under esteem and self-actualization needs. So, you know, when you're not really feeling safe, when you're feeling like, oh, geez, I could go out, I could get really sick, I could infect my grandmother. And when your social needs under love and belonging are not necessarily being met, it's hard to learn. Yeah, and you know, and to translate that into, you know, another body of psychology is like the psychology of trauma. Like trauma is really well known to interfere with learning. So it's extra reason to go easy with yourself right now. So that feeds into the goal to set about your time management and basically set about your achievement at university in general. A lot of people go for perfection, you know, they wanting to get straight A's, or in terms of time management, there are so many students who they make a very idealistic schedule. You know, maybe they've only studied 10 hours a week before and, you know, they didn't do well. And they're like, okay, I'm going to turn over a new leaf, make some really big changes. And, you know, they're scheduling in 35 hours a week of studying outside of class. They put it willy-nilly, and then, you know, the first week they don't stick to it, and second week they don't stick to it, and then they're like, schedules don't work for me, because they've been too perfectionist about it. And, you know, and it's very easy to give up when you're being perfectionist. So it's better to gain wisdom, which in this context has to do with gaining wisdom about yourself and what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and what might be a realistic goal and what might not be a realistic goal for you. So, you know, some people, like a lot of students, say like work almost full-time hours and also take a fairly heavy course load. And for some people, you know, some people can handle it. It probably depends on what else is going on in their life, if they have supportive people in their lives, you know, how hard the job is that they're doing, you know, how much mental energy it saps and whatever. And, you know, but for some people, it really is taking on too much. And, you know, if you're taking on too much, you could be excellent at time management and it's still, things wouldn't fall in place because it's just too much. You know, some people's schedules, there's probably nobody in the world who could succeed with that kind of schedule. You know, so you kind of need to look inward and, you know, figure out what are your capabilities, what are your limitations, what conditions work for you and need to be in place, and, you know, what does not work so well, you know, and just really having a curious attitude rather than a beating yourself up kind of attitude throughout this whole process. So having said that, it's probably good this is coming fairly early-ish in the term, because it's a bit of a reality check. And this is also an ideal. So, you know, sometimes people don't do this every week and actually end up doing fine. But, you know, it's considered to be, for optimal performance, that for a 3-unit class, you would spend 2 to 3 times that, which is like 6 to 9 hours outside of class, you know, so that's apart from class hours. So that would be like studying, schoolwork, reading, you know, anything you had to do other than attending class for the class. And when we were in person, like you're just kind of assuming that it's probably 3 class hours for a 3-unit course, although I know there are lab courses or whatever where it's even more. And if you have an online course with, you know, say it's 3 units and there's 3 schedule hours of lectures in a week, then sure. But for a lot of classes, you know, you don't have as much lecture time, or it's not scheduled. It's like there's material and you go through it whenever. So I've put that right into the study formula. So you have to account for 3 class hours for each class that's 3 units. whether it's, you know, actual classes or the equivalent of a class, like going through lecture slides. 6 to 9 study hours for each 3-unit class. So that gives you 9 to 12 hours. Like if you're taking a 3-unit class, you can expect ideally to spend 9 to 12 hours total on it. So that means, you know, if you take what's considered to be a minimum full course load of 9 units, then you multiply that by 3 and it would be like a total of 27 to 36 hours for that course load. That's like a full-time job. Like my full-time job is 36 hours a week. So, you know, and that's considered to be like, people say, oh, I'm only taking 3 courses, right? But I mean, 3 courses is actually, it can be a full-time job if you're really doing it to the nth degree. So it's a bit of a reality check, you know, and if you look at other things in your life, or, you know, or if your units are above that, you know, then you really are taking a lot, and, you know, you need to look at your capability for that, in terms of the balance, and, you know, see, okay, you know, should I maybe even be dropping a course, possibly. So the first step is really self-reflection, you know, so like, what is my personal study formula in terms of the number of courses I'm taking? Am I, you know, like, say, looking at last week, this week so far, am I devoting anything near the study formula? You might want to keep track. Like, I think, you know, if somebody asked me in undergraduate, like, how many hours a week are you doing schoolwork outside of class, I would have had no idea, you know. So you might want to keep track, like every time you sit down to do some schoolwork, you write a start time, you write an end time, you track it for about a week. And part of it, you know, I mean, if you're constantly like on top of things, even though you're not anywhere near the study formula, you know, and you're, you know, caught up in your readings, and you feel like, you know, kind of like you understand your classes, even if you don't have tests coming up, you know, because sometimes people delude themselves, like they've done all the things immediately, like, okay, I've done all the assignments that are due this week, but they haven't put in anything in advance, like working ahead on an assignment that's due in a couple of weeks, or studying in advance for a midterm, like, you know, keeping up with their classes. Then you're not really on top of things. But, you know, if you really are truly on top of things, like maybe, you know, for some people it does take extra, like not as much time. If you're, say, 3rd, 4th year, you've kind of gotten used to this university thing by now, and you might have developed some effective shortcuts. But really, you know, I'd say before the drop deadline arises, which you can look up what the drop deadline is. I'm a little bit confused about it because it keeps being changed during the pandemic. But really just reassessing like how on top of things that you feel, because it is definitely, you know, unless you can't drop any courses because of your funding or student loan status or visa status or something like that, it is definitely better to drop than to fail, even though it's really expensive to drop. Yeah. And sometimes, you know, like I gave that example of somebody who'd been studying 10 hours a week, and then they suddenly put 35 hours in their schedule and expect to stick with it, which is, you know, not so realistic. Sometimes you might have to work up to it, right? So you might have to be like, okay, I'm aware that I've only been doing 10 hours. I'm going to try for like 13 next week, you know, and then maybe gradually work up from there, rather than all of a sudden, you know, without sort of seeing where you're at, trying to do 35. And the only caution is that as you reflect on, you know, am I studying anywhere near the study formula? Am I feeling behind? Am I feeling caught up? You know, that you don't then get into the perfectionist mode and, you know, start beating yourself up, right? Take a more gradual approach. Sometimes you have to do this gradually. So a better attitude is to be curious. If it turns out that, you know, that you were not devoting enough time for your studies. So think about how full your life is. If you have anything you need to sacrifice or limit, which can be hard if you're working and going to school, and you're working because you need the money to continue going to school, it can be very hard to limit anything. But sometimes it's more about, okay, every morning I lie in bed for a half hour listening to the radio to try to wake myself up, and maybe I can kind of cut that out and do something a bit more productive. What are your winning conditions? That's another thing to think about. So it might not be as much about the amount of time as when you're doing things. So what time of day am I most productive? So, say somebody who takes a long time to wake up, and, they're pretty good in the afternoon, but they keep scheduling studying in the morning. They keep being like, okay, I'm going to wake up early and get an hour in of studying, and then they never do it. I think it's like, well, I think I've scheduled it too early. Like, rather than beating yourself up and saying like, why can't I wake up and study? Just say, maybe it would be better if I found some time in the afternoon, and I did continue to sleep in, because that's what's going to work for me. Think about place, and just because you're at home doesn't mean that place is irrelevant. Because I do find that when I'm sitting at my kitchen table, I'm more productive than when I'm sitting on the sofa. Sometimes I have to go back and forth because of, my back or whatever, but if I want to be productive, I sit at the kitchen table. Do you have, anybody that you study well with? Or like, did you study better with people in the before times and now you kind of can't anymore? Maybe there are ways of bringing it in, maybe having a FaceTime with your study partner or something while you're studying, you both just on there holding each other accountable. And there are actually, Student Services is going to be organizing some study halls like that. It's, like a workshop like this, but there isn't really a lot of content. It's somebody will facilitate it, ask what your goals are for the session, and and then you'll just study, but there'll be like a bunch of students studying around you, kind of like the library or a cafe or something you might be used to. And it's kind of surprising how well that works, even though you might think, oh, just because somebody else is on the screen is it really going to work, but it does tend to. Either that, or like if there's more than just you and your household working from home, maybe like arranging a kitchen table time with like other people in your home who also have work to do, if you find that you work better when you're around people. The distractions, so there's things you might have to deal with in your environment, like talking to other people in your household about, when you're going to be studying, like they should try to be quiet, they should try not to interrupt you. You might have to get noise canceling headphones if there's construction going on your street or something that's noisy for you. Things like, like your phone or your video game system, maybe that's not where you want to sit when you're studying. Like maybe, leave your video game system and your phone in your bedroom and go and study somewhere else in your place. And then make sure you're giving yourself enough fuel, so like good nutrition, you're sleeping enough so that you're not all draggy. Because I was just, Danielle asked me when we were coming in, like, how do you feel? I'm like, well, I'm kind of tired. I didn't get a very good sleep last night. And I hope it's not coming out in my facilitation, but it certainly was coming out in my ability to, do my paperwork for the day. So sleep is important. Exercise, that's something like if you find that procrastination, anxiety kind of get you, exercise is a good way to kind of blast that away, and remove the stress so that you can kind of calm your mind and get down to work. Okay, so the second step is prioritizing, and there's an activity. I'm kind of wondering, let me see, maybe I should do a poll. There are 5 of you. So I'm just going to ask if you want to do the activity now, which would involve I'm having trouble doing this poll. Just a second. Oh yeah, never mind. I'm not going to do a poll. You can put it in chat. Are you still seeing the PowerPoint? Anyhow, yeah, so like if you do the activity, then it would make this longer and you might have to leave. Oh yes, you can see the PowerPoint, that's great. Yeah, some people might have to leave before the workshop is done if you do the activity. Otherwise, I could describe the activity and you could do it on your own, you know, and you can even, like I invite you anytime you want to take a picture of the slides, you can take a picture of the slide and save it for later. So what do people think? If you can just put it in chat, because I was having trouble launching a poll. So put activity if you want to do the activity. Oh, I just stopped sharing by mistake. And I'm on the wrong slide now. I think I don't have anyone putting comments, so I think I'm just going to describe the activity. And if you like, you can take a picture of the next 2 slides and do it on your own. So just make a list of the activities that typically take your time, energy, and attention. You can include things, like sleep, getting ready in the morning, all that kind of thing, just kind of everything. And then next to each, just make a note if you want to increase, decrease, or if you're happy with the amount of time that you spend on that activity. And really think about your own values, like not about, what your parents are telling you, your professors are telling you, your own values. And here's a key, like if there's an activity you want to increase, you have to find the time somewhere. So you also have to decrease something else or maybe a number of other things so that you come to the same amount of time. So this activity is not about, actually planning how many hours you're going to spend, but keep it in mind. Like you can't just say, oh, I want to increase this, I want to increase that, I want to increase that, without also coming up with some things to eliminate or decrease. Because that's where a lot of people go wrong when they're in school. They go into a new semester saying, well, I wasn't happy with my grades last term, I want to study more. But if they don't plan like what they're going to do less of, then probably they're not going to study more because they're just going business as usual, doing all the stuff that normally fills their time. So where's the time for the extra study? So it's very important to think about what you're going to give up or limit. And then, really healthy activities, that's not the place to decrease because that's what gives you energy. So you have this list and you have, kind of a rough plan for, maybe keeping some activities the same, increasing some, decreasing some, eliminating others. And here's another lens to look at it through. And this is from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, although I heard that actually it pre-existed him. It was called the Eisenhower Matrix. And it's a way of classifying all of the activities in your life by their importance and their urgency. So in quadrant 1, you have activities that are both important and urgent. And that's where a lot of people kind of live in university. It's like, when you're scrambling to finish a paper that's due the next day, or when you are cramming for an exam the next day or something, that tends to be in quadrant 1. Like it's important and you're not really doing it until it's urgent. And then there's other things that are just, daily, like making dinner for your family or something. Yeah, they have to have it at a certain time and it's pretty important. And then you get quadrant 2, and those are things that are important but not urgent. That's like when you're working ahead on something. So you're like, okay, I have this paper, it's not due until a month from now, but I have a lot on my plate with all my courses, my part-time job and everything. So I really had better start now, even though it's not due for a month. So I think like a lot of people kind of realize that that would be like a great way to work, but it can be kind of hard to find the motivation, right? Without the deadline pressure. You know, and plus sometimes if you're in a cycle like where you're always doing things in quadrant 1, there's always something else to cram for, there's always something else to do at the last minute. So it's hard to find the time to do things in quadrant 2. So one thing I suggest that if you're in that kind of trap, that you just carve out like even 15 minutes a day, you know, or 10 minutes a day, like just the most that you can handle, which could be very, very small, to, you know, start working on something long-term that's really important. And it just kind of gradually, even if though it's just a little bit of time, it gradually reduces the amount of things for quadrant 1. You know, so over time, it's a way to kind of break out of the pattern, and you'll eventually be able to increase the time to work on things in quadrant 2, where it's not nearly so stressful. And then quadrant 3 is when something, it seems urgent, but it's actually not very important to you. You know, so it's kind of like often it's things that are important to other people, but not so much you. So, you know, like your friends call and they want to go out in pre-COVID times, or, you know, maybe your friends want to play video games online with you or something like that, you know, right now. We're doing it right now. You have to do it with us right now. You can't do it later. You know, that's their priority. It might not be your priority, you know. So for quadrant 3 things, it's often about saying no. It's about, you know, really kind of separating out what's important to you. And is the thing really as urgent as you think it is? Like, does it really matter if you miss it? And then quadrant 4 is, you know, is when you're just kind of procrastinating, or leisure activities. I mean, a certain amount of leisure activities, I don't want to be judgy because balance is important, right? So sometimes leisure activities are quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. Like quadrant 2, I need a certain number of leisure activities in order to feel okay. But, you know, when it becomes excessive, when it's a tool for procrastination, then it tends to be, you know, quadrant 4. So a lot of students like will just cram in quadrant 1, and then they're exhausted. So what do when those tasks are achieved? They just go right to quadrant 4 and, you know, just kind of excessively crash and reward themselves. I mean, you want to reward yourself a bit when you've done a real big push and achieved something, but you know, if you over reward yourself with a break, then you kind of bypass your quadrant 2 time for the next thing. And all of a sudden you're in quadrant 1 again, and the cycle repeats. So what I would do with your list from the previous slide, the list of your activities, your intention to increase, decrease, or stay the same, is I would try to classify all the activities according to what quadrant they are for you, and then take another look at them, because sometimes that kind of can change your perspective, you know, and maybe something that you had marked that you want to stay the same, you realize, wait a minute, that's probably more of a quadrant 3 activity that's, you know, not so important and urgent. So yeah, maybe I will decrease it or something. Okay, so step 3 is having some systems and tools. And it really seems like that's something that you tend to excel at as a group. You know, I think pretty much everybody, when I said, you know, what is working well with your time management, it was you have some sort of written system. So I'm not going to spend like a ton of time on this, but if you don't have one for this term, it's really good to have a semester at a glance calendar where you can see all your deadlines for the whole term in one place. You know, and this is not the same schedule that you put like your class times and your work shifts and all that stuff on. Like, you don't want to have it really cluttered. I mean, you know, the ideal thing I'm visualizing is one of those dry erase boards like pictured here, with the 4 months of the term, and it's on your wall and you can see it. And all you have on it are your deadlines, your exam times, your papers due, you know, the days you have quizzes, whatever. And also like really big things in your life that are going to get in the way. So I'm trying to think, like, I mean, I keep thinking about the pre-COVID examples, like when you're planning to travel for a week or something like that. But I mean, say reading break. Some people will work really hard on reading break. Other people, maybe reading break is the time that they're just going to dive deep into work and work every single day or something like that, or just, you know, really kick back and do nothing. If you're planning to have like a big period like that, you know, or even a weekend like that, is probably worth marking. So then, you know, it gives you advance notice of when things pile up and when you have to do, like, the whole purpose of this is to really have an early alert for when you have to really work ahead at something, and when you have to maybe structure your life a little bit differently so that you can. So, you know, it's mid-January now. If you were just looking at this week, or you were just looking at this month or something, you might not really realize that, say, you know, the week of February 1st, you have 3 different deadlines, plus you've blocked off 2 days for work, you know, or even if you hadn't blocked off 2 days for work, you know, you have 3 different deadlines that week. So, you know, knowing about that now, I mean, now might be actually a good time to get started on those deadlines because you have a couple of weeks. But if you know, just kind of figured it out the week of, then that wouldn't work at all, you know? Because I mean, if you have normal work shifts, then 2 weeks in advance, it's possible, depending on your job, that you could see if you could cancel the work shifts for that week or switch them or something like that. Whereas, you know, if you find out just that week, you know, you look at your stuff for the week, you're like, well, no, it's too late to try to change any of my work shifts. So it's a really good tool for seeing the relationship between the different things you have to do in your life that are major and the things that could be standing in the way. Then you kind of have your classic weekly schedule that sounds like some people do. And, you know, the process of scheduling is to put all of the things that happen at the same time each week down first. And then you can add in the weekly details. So here you have, you know, 2 courses worth of live lectures. You work out at the same time every day. You have like a job at the same time every week, et cetera, et cetera. You have 1 asynchronous class, you know, so it's like 3 hours. I mean, 3 units, right? So you have to kind of allot 3 hours for the course portion, but it's not at any particular time. And a lot of people are like, great, I can do it at any time. But the danger is like that you never get to it, that it's always the thing that you push off because you don't really have anything reminding you that you have to work on this thing. So I would actually schedule like a 3-unit asynchronous class in for the same 3 hours every week as if you did have a schedule, you know, and then you could put the rest of the study blocks like elsewhere. But at least you have the basic, like every week, I'm going to be spending 3 hours on this at the same time as if it was a class. Then the next thing you would do is you'd put in anything for that particular week that's happening that you have to schedule around. Then you would put in your study blocks, and you want to keep them short. You want to disperse them throughout the week so that it doesn't interfere with your concentration because it's too much, doesn't lead to procrastination because it's too much. And also write in what exactly you're going to work on during that time. You know, so that's a way of ensuring, like if you kind of go between this system and your semester at a glance, like you can base what the study blocks are on working ahead for your deadlines. So, you know, make sure that everything is covered when you do your planning for the week. And this is another video that I don't think we're going to have time to watch, but you can, you know, again, take a picture if you want to go to the URL. It's a TED Talk where the guy is talking about research that was done on students in England and in Australia, and found out 2 things that the students who get the top grades do differently than the students who do not get the top grades. And it was consistent. It was consistent in England, same way it was in Australia. So one of the things had to do with study strategies. And I'll tell you, that it had to do with doing a lot of practice questions and practice tests as the primary method of studying for an exam. And the other one had to do with time management. So does anyone have any guesses about, what top students do differently with their time management? You just somebody take a wild guess and you can put it in the chat if you want. Give themselves study breaks, space out study periods. Those are both like really good tactics, right? So like you saw, yeah, plan ahead. I mean, these are all good tactics, but I mean, a lot of people plan ahead. Definitely study breaks are really good, especially like when you're used to doing everything at home. You need to do things to clear your head and change your scenery for sure. Review material after class. Yes, that's really important too. But it also isn't what distinguishes the top students from the rest of them. It's really counterintuitive. The top students, before they start putting in their study blocks for the week, they will put in, some time, at least a couple of times a week, to do what they enjoy the most, kind of what keeps them going, what gives them balance. So if they really like knitting or something, they would put in some knitting time, and then they'd start planning their study blocks. Maybe knitting is kind of a physical activity. So, maybe that would make a good study break. It's really good for your study breaks, like to have a break like 15 minutes or so every 45 minutes, and to make it a physical break where you're doing something totally different, so like exercise or working with your hands, like crafts, or taking a shower, or, just something like that that's just completely different from a mental activity. But actually, like, they really prioritize it. They plan it in advance. They schedule it into their schedules to make sure that they do it. It might be something like socializing. You just have to be careful because, some of these activities people completely go overboard on. So you don't want to go in that direction. But, like, you could ask yourself, like, what's a reasonable amount of time for me to be talking over FaceTime with my friends in a week? And you might say, okay, I think 4 hours a week is reasonable and I can handle that with all my other commitments. And so you schedule that one in first if that's what really keeps you going. We talked about to-do lists, like my example, that I tend to put on too many things. I know it's not achievable and then I just ignore it. So I want to make my to-do lists more like the ones that are pictured, that only have a few things on them. And because they only have a few points on them, like you could even write it on your hand or write it on a Post-it. When I'm on campus, I actually do sometimes just put a point on a Post-it and I stick it to my computer monitor to remind me that that's my priority for the day. Okay, and then there's a list of 15 other time management strategies. And I'm going to drop the link for this in the chat and give you a few minutes to look at it. And I'd like everybody to identify one or two that you want to start with that you haven't really done before, or maybe if you've done them in the past, you haven't done it recently before. And then put the name of that strategy in the chat box. Okay, so I just have to find where I have that URL and stick it in the chat. Okay. Oh, here's the chat. Okay. Okay, so I'll just give you a couple of minutes And then everyone can drop something in the chat, and that's probably going to take us to about 4:20, which is on paper the end of the workshop. If anyone needs to leave, then certainly feel free to leave. But I'm sorry I put, talk about taking on too much. I've taken on too much in this workshop, so I will go a bit past. So once you've identified one or two that you want to try, make a commitment to try it in the next week or so, or like even today or the next day, by putting it in the chat. And I'm just going to mute myself for a minute. Yeah, sorry. My daughter just came in from a long walk, so.
What snacks do we have?
Check the cupboard. And well, there's two cupboards now, that one.
How would I?
Mm-hmm. Oh, some people are putting things in the chat now, which is great. Would be nice if I could get to it. Just a second. I've got to take another look at it. Okay, so maybe MIT most important task and the not to do list. Yeah, I think especially if you have things you procrastinate with, the not to do list is a good idea. Personal Kanban, that can be really gratifying to like move your Post-its over. Weekly review, yeah, I like doing that too, the weekly review and planning ahead. MIT disconnecting and artificial deadlines. Yeah, the artificial deadlines can really keep you motivated. It's probably a good tactic to get out of quadrant 1 because you can kind of trick yourself that you're actually in quadrant 1 when you're not. Yeah, and disconnecting is one that like it's really good to combine it with other things, right? It works well with most important task, because maybe you don't want to disconnect every time you go to study, but when you have something that's really a priority, it's like, I'm going to focus on that and I'm disconnecting my phone at this point. Or the other one that works really well with it is the first 90. So when I have something like a deadline approaching at work or something, then I would tend to like try to work on it right when I first start in the morning. Like I wouldn't even open my email or anything. I would just be like, I'm working on this first. And when I'm done, maybe I'll look at my email. Okay, good. So I really encourage you to try the thing that you've committed to in the next couple of days. And, and if it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, you can go back and try something else. And even if it does work, you can build on it and add in some other strategies as you go along. Okay, so for big projects, the type that you might procrastinate, here's some strategies for moving from quadrant 1 to quadrant 2. Doing it for like even 15 minutes the day that you get the project at school can really help. Not just because you're doing it in advance and you might end up like doing a little bit of work all the way through, but even if you don't do a little bit work all the way through, it breaks the fear factor. So for the longer that you put away a project without tackling it, the anxiety tends to build up and build up and build up. But if you look at it, for a short time when you first get it, there's two things that could happen. One of the things that could happen is that you realize that it's not so hard and you want to keep working on it, or you feel okay about putting it away for quite a while because it truly isn't that hard. Or, you know, maybe you realize, oh, my worst fears are realized. This is really, really difficult. But it's the first day that you've gotten the thing. So, you know, at that point, you can go for help. You have plenty of time to go for help, you know, and resolve the issue and then just kind of move forward. You also want to break it into small steps. So, you know, even the way you talk to yourself about it, think about small steps. So, you know, I know like times when I was in school, I'd be like, okay, you know, it's Sunday, I'm going to work on my essay. And that can be just so overwhelming. You know, I have to write an essay. It's going to be 10 pages long. It's like, oh, and I haven't done anything. You know, it probably at that point would be more productive to say, okay, today I'm going to read all the guidelines for the essay and make sure I understand them and, you know, and try to brainstorm about a topic. You know, and then the next day, say I've done that, I'd be like, okay, so I have my topic and I'm going to run it by my TA today. And assuming my TA is good with that topic, I'm going to find 3 articles to support my position, you know, and just kind of think about it that way. So it's not so anxiety provoking. And, you know, and just do a little bit of quadrant 2 every day, you know, even if it is 10 minutes, and having no 0 days, you know, where you don't work on it at all. So, or when you don't do at least some schoolwork at all, it may or may not be the project. And that's really important if you are in math or physics, you know, some sort of quantitative course. The professors really emphasize for those courses that it's all about being in constant practice. And if there's some day that's like super, super, super busy, you know, even if you just do one problem that day, it keeps you kind of going. So, I mean, you can break up any type of project, you know, whether it's like this big IAT design project, or, you know, studying for an exam, the process for studying for an exam. On the Student Learning Commons website, we have something called an exam preparation inventory template that you can use for that. The cool thing, if it's an essay or especially a research paper, there's this online tool, the assignment calculator, on the SFU Library website. And it will break any project down into a number of steps. I think it's 8 steps. Okay, somebody put something in the chat and I'm having trouble seeing the chat again. It seems like when I'm like seeing the PowerPoint for the full screen, it's kind of hard to see the chat. So I'm sorry about that. Yeah, anyhow, if it's really urgent, you should maybe unmute yourself and tell me, because I'm having trouble seeing the chat without getting out of the PowerPoint. Anyhow, so it breaks it up into a number of steps. Each step, it gives an artificial deadline, because you've put in, what you've put in is the day you're starting the project and the day that it's due. And so, you know, you're starting it on the 15th, by the next day is the first step, your artificial deadline. And under each step, it also has some links to help you with that step if you're having some issues with it. So, you know, if you get a research paper or even an essay, like one of the steps is research, but you can always cross off the research step. You know, just very early on, planning it out and giving yourself a bunch of artificial deadlines for the different pieces. Using this tool, it's a lot easier. You don't even have to really think for yourself about how you would break it down. Okay. So step number 5 is mostly sticking to your plans. I've had so many students say, oh, I'm really good at making schedules. I'm not so good at following schedules. So we talked about being realistic and reflecting and being self-aware, like about what works for you more when it comes to sticking with your plans, like, noticing patterns of times when you planned to do something and you didn't. And comparing them to times when you planned to do the same thing, but you did, who were you with? What time of day was it? Thinking about things like that. That's one way to help you stick to your plans, but other ways are, to realize that you can be flexible. Like just because you've written down this schedule doesn't mean you can't change it. so you get a last minute invitation to something. Sometimes you just have to say no to it because, you really don't have more time to study, especially if you're working on something in quadrant 1. But, sometimes like you're planning to study and your parents want to have family movie night and you're like, okay, we can do it. I will just study later today, because I have some free time then and I can do that. So don't think about it as if it's written in stone. Like it's okay to trade things off as long as you are trading things off and you're being intentional when you change your plans. Yeah, because sometimes thinking it's set in stone makes people resist writing a schedule. Getting into the zone, so sometimes there are things that'll make you more mentally prepared for studying. Like, maybe some people like to exercise before to calm their body. For some people, you don't want to exercise before because it's just going to exhaust you too much. You might want to, get some fresh air to get you into the zone, do some meditation, set up your desk in a certain way. I mean, like, especially if your desk is also what you use for your part-time job, also what you use for your gaming, like just sometimes even just putting things in drawers in your desk and taking out your school books on your desk can help you get into the zone. Having an accountability buddy. So, enlisting the help of, maybe somebody that you live with, or just maybe some other friend, to say like, okay, every day, maybe you exchange your goals for the day with each other and you check in with each other at the end of the day. That could be a way of doing it. You want somebody supportive, somebody who's going to get into problem solving mode, because I'm saying don't beat yourself up when you don't stick with your plans, like just be curious about why. So you want to have a friend who's going to be curious along with you and try to troubleshoot and not judge you, because, the judging is going to create the guilt will create the anxiety will create the procrastination. So just somebody supportive who, celebrates with you, like when you actually do manage to meet your study goal, even if it's a small thing, and somebody who will troubleshoot with you when you don't, so when I mean celebrate the tiniest success and give yourself rewards, sometimes the reward is just, having somebody or even yourself acknowledge that, hey, I did a good job. I'm not going to say, okay, you've got to spend a bunch of money on yourself and like take a huge break as far as time goes every time you do anything. But acknowledge it, like acknowledge when like I read that chapter that I didn't want to read, or I went on the Zoom that I didn't want to go on, or, or whatever, because it's all those things added together that mean that you graduate from university. And sometimes you do want a real reward, like if you're itching to watch Netflix and you study instead, then yeah, like after you've met your study goals, give yourself an hour of Netflix as a reward or something. Sometimes if you really, you really are really itching to watch Netflix and you're just about to watch Netflix when, you're supposed to be studying, you can just say, hey, I'm just going to force myself to do some work for 5 minutes before I'll watch Netflix. And sometimes, just even saying 5 minutes will get you into it to the extent that you realize it's not so bad. I mean, I can do a little bit more before I watch Netflix, and before you know, you've put in an hour of work and gotten quite a bit done. And then, this point is really, really important, is to continue with your reflecting and being self-aware, like, is what I'm doing now working? Like what's helping, what's not helping, like especially the new strategies that you took on from that handout. I want to do a personal Kanban. Okay, is it working for me? Am I finding it gratifying to move the Post-its over? Is it motivating me? Maybe at some point you've done it now for 6 months and it stops motivating you, so you want to just always kind of tune in to what's working for you, because it might not be the same thing that has worked for you in the past. And just give yourself a lot of self-compassion, because remember, we're in a trauma. We are running up against Maslow's hierarchy of needs when it comes to being able to learn. Yeah, so distractions, multitasking, I think a lot of people try to do a couple of things at once, whether it's a couple of productive things or just, you know, you have your phone on while you're studying and, you know, people might be messaging you or something like that. And there has been research conducted about multitasking, you know, and sometimes people, you know, will say, oh, I'm really efficient, I can get so much done. But the research kind of disputes that. Like it's like when you're multitasking, things tend to take longer, they tend to be done at a worse quality, you know, so it is a lot better to put away, you know, any sort of thing that's going to tempt you to multitask, like other tabs on your computer or your phone, or you know, just other, like anything that's, you know, having like having the TV on when you're studying or something. That's kind of a classic one. Yeah, you don't really want to be doing that at all. And you know, and again, like a lot of your distractions, it might just be because you're stuck in your house doing schoolwork, and you know, there's 5 other people that live there, and you don't even have your own room, you know, and a lot of that, it just has to do with communication, you know, and just being able to have those difficult kind of conversations when you have to. Okay, the final strategy may be the most important, right? It's about sleeping. Yeah, I mean, you know, animals can't really choose to deprive themselves of sleep to get more done, right? I mean, and there's a reason that it doesn't happen in nature. It's because it's not a good thing to do. So lack of sleep interferes with like pretty much everything cognitive, your problem solving ability, your concentration, your memory, your time management intentions, you know, like where, oh, I put something down for 9 in the morning and I completely slept through it, you know, or like I slept through my lectures, so now I have to catch up. You know, so it can throw off a lot of things. And I've had math professors like give workshops through the SLC before, and that's the first thing they always say is that, you know, if you don't get enough sleep at night, you're sabotaging yourself. So I think a lot of students, like they almost see it as a badge of honor being a dedicated student. Like I stayed up really late studying, you know, I've been only getting 6 hours sleep because I'm working so hard. But the thing is, you know, if you had gotten like 8.5 hours of sleep, maybe instead of 6, you maybe could have gotten like the same amount done, because, you know, if you were regularly in the habit of being well rested, you're going to work more efficiently anyhow. Okay. So I'm just wondering, you know, what it is you're going to try, like in addition to in addition to the strategies from that sheet, is there anything else that you are going to try that you've heard about today? And it's probably better if you unmute yourself because I keep having trouble navigating between the PowerPoint and the chat.
For me, I think I'm gonna. Sorry, is there an echo?
Not much of an echo, it's fine.
Okay. For me, I think I'm going to stick with like some of my old strategies and work on that I saw on the list too, such as like the distraction one, also maybe some other like the Pomodoro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Pomodoro is really, really popular among students. There's a video, if you Google, I mean, not Google, if you go on YouTube and you search SFU study with me, there's a video of somebody doing the Pomodoro method for 2 hours. So you can almost like work along with a virtual study buddy. Yeah, anybody else? Okay, so that is it, and I'm sorry about that, but oh, okay, one thing that I didn't put in this workshop because I just kind of forgot is that you can apply for co-curricular record credit for doing it. So if you don't know how to apply for co-curricular record credit, you can stick around and I'll share my screen and show you. But if you already know how to, then you don't need to stick around. And it's basically having an official record, which is kind of like a transcript, but it lists everything you do at SFU outside of class. Well, everything that the organizers have applied to anyhow, have applied to have a co-curricular record certified. And it can be useful when you're, you know, trying to write your resume to remember like what you've done and what you've learned and that kind of thing. Or if, you know, for some reason an employer needs proof of things that you've participated in. So I'm just going to share my browser again. And this is on the Student Learning Commons website. I'll go to find a workshop on the Student Learning Commons website, which is where you would have found this, so everyone knows how to get to it. And you have the co-curricular record symbol. And if you go to this link, webinar reflection forum for CCR, it'll take you to a web survey, and you just answer some questions about this webinar on the web survey and submit it. And then at the end of the term, it will be entered into your co-curricular record. Okay, so even though I've gone over time, which I apologize for, it's especially embarrassing when it's a time management workshop. I am still willing to stay longer if anyone has any questions. Just talk about individually. And I'll stop the recording.